Ron? Where are you? Where is Ron right now? You done messed up, Ron!
All right, Ron is here this evening. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm here once again with B. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad it's Friday. How about you?
Yes, I'm definitely glad it's Friday. Before we get started, I want to show everyone your YouTube channel called Mood Candy, where you make all those things that are on the wall behind you there.
Yep. It's rave jewelry. It's fun. It's crafts.
However, it wasn't that long ago that you were in the Sea organization in Los Angeles. You had a variety of posts, and what I wanted to talk about tonight was this other guy. Let me pull him up. Ugh. Johnny Mauerer. Johnny Mauerer is a Scientologist out of Sacramento who has abused in very specific ways many minor Scientology girls, staff members, and Scientology has very systematically covered up his abuse, has very specifically and directly silenced his victims under threats of expulsion and disconnection. And Scientology decided that a very safe place to send someone who had committed crimes against children for which he could be prosecuted and imprisoned was, let's send him to Clearwater. He'll be okay in Clearwater. So they sent him from California to Clearwater, where, by the way, there happens to be more Scientology children here in Clearwater than anywhere else in the world. So why they would send somebody like Johnny Mauerer to Clearwater, I'll leave that to the experts. But I wanted to talk to you because when you were in the Sea organization in Los Angeles, you worked at the Continental Management Office in Los Angeles. You had, let's define some words before we use them here, okay? So Scientology's organizing chart has 7 divisions. Division 5 is quality control. In the real world, you call it quality control, quality assurance. In Scientology, they just call it qualifications. And there's sort of a continental office that represents all the qualifications departments in the Western U.S. in this case, and that person is called the Senior QualSec, the Senior Qualifications Secretary. In this case, secretary is used more like cabinet secretary or department head, not like typist secretary. Okay, so you held the post of Senior QualSec West U.S., and whether it was from your experience on that post or prior, can you just tell me what was your knowledge of who Johnny Mauerer was, separate from the crimes that we're going to discuss? Who was Johnny? What did you know about him, and how did you know it?
Yeah. So when I came into like management at West US level and started going to like the weekly meetings and everything, there were a small handful of orgs that were actually making any money at all, and like that we didn't have to bail out their rent every single week or every single month. And it was like, the 3 or 4 orgs that actually were like doing something. And at that time, Sacramento was one of those orgs. Johnny Mauerer was the HES, which is one of the top executives for Sacramento Day. And he was one of the divisions he was in charge of was the money-making division, registration. So between him and the executive director at the time, they were like 2 of the top registrars in all of West US, meaning they made the most money. They were like, if you wanted to like close a deal, you send them to Johnny and Mickey. And to the point where after Sacramento had finished their fundraising, they got their ideal org building. Sacramento was always counted on to make like huge, $500,000 IAS donation goals because they knew they had the regis there for it. And then they would start sending out, Johnny or Mickey or whatever as a team or even solo to other West US orgs that were doing their fundraising because Johnny was so good at making money that it was like, well, he was a day org staff member. So we'll fly him out for the weekend. And this weekend he'll go to, whatever org in like Kansas and do fundraising, then he'll be back on post on Monday. So that way it was like a moonlight basically.
Incredible. That's very unusual, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I don't know I know maybe like 2 or 3 other staff members in all of West US that did things like that at all.
Yeah. So was it just raising money for buildings or the IES that Johnny and Mickey were good at, or were they really good at selling, auditing, and courses too?
I mean, they were pretty good at selling auditing and courses as well, basics, packages, recruitment, like anything that required you to like close a deal, they were very good at. So, you know, there's only so much Scientology you can sell to somebody. Like once they're clear, once they're class 5, like there's not that much left to sell them. So you just fundraise them. But yeah, they were very good at selling things to people just in general.
So because Johnny was so good, and I guess Mickey was really good as well, but she was the executive director, so maybe a little less expendable. Can't really, I don't know. Did they send Mickey around to different orgs the way they did Johnny?
She would occasionally get sent as like a guest speaker for specifically for like ideal org fundraisers or recruitment events where you needed like a really good recruiter, or you wanted somebody who's like, look, Sacramento did it, we can do it too, and like have Mickey come and speak. But Johnny was definitely sent out more often and more frequently than Mickey was. Like I remember having conversations about how basically he had made it his other job, his moonlight is what it's called in Scientology. I don't know if that's a regular people word or not, but but he literally like made fundraising his like moonlight job. Nights and weekends he'd be out fundraising with like the Sea Org fundraisers, and that's how he made money, was off of those commissions. It would go into like the staff pay some.
Interesting. And I've heard at some point Johnny ended up partnering up with Tom Cruise's son, Connor Cruise, to do some kind of fundraising. And I'm not totally clear whether that started in Los Angeles, where Connor was on staff for a while, or whether it started after they sent Johnny to Clearwater, because then Connor was living in Clearwater. Do you happen to know one way or the other?
I never heard about him fundraising with Connor, so I assume that it's something that happened after he got sent to Clearwater, but I couldn't say for sure. I never saw Connor fundraising though.
When you were on post in LA, was Connor Cruise a staff member at the Los Angeles org?
If I recall correctly, he was a staff member at the Los Angeles org up until they went like changed into a Sea Org org. His contract might have expired like shortly before that, but he was definitely on staff for at least 2.5 years.
But is that when you were there?
Yes, it was like like around 2012 for sure.
Yeah. The only reason I'm asking that specifically is you can say from personal firsthand experience that Connor Cruise was in fact a staff member, a Scientology staff member at Los Angeles org, not just like, I can only say someone's told it to me. I wasn't there at the time.
So before I even joined the Sea Org, I joined staff at Valley Org when I was 15, which is another local like LA area org. And the people that I grew up with being like best friends in middle school and high school all went and joined staff at LA org. And so we all like hung out together. We were all like a group for years, and Connor Cruise was part of that group. So I know for sure firsthand experience, Connor Cruise worked in the ethics department at LA org for several years.
It's really interesting to think about that because I mean, I think I was told that Connor Cruise was the DIR, the Director of Inspections and Reports, and I don't know if that's true. Or was he actually the ethics officer? What do you recall?
I don't recall. He might have been the DIR. He might have just been an ethics officer. I don't remember the exact post title, but for sure he worked in Department 3.
Right. And so for those of you watching, that means Connor Cruise for years, 2.5 years or more, held a position in Los Angeles where he knew all the dirt on all the public Scientologists. And this is Tom Cruise's son. People don't really talk about that. I wasn't even particularly aware of it until recently when someone reminded me of it. And I don't know, it might have even been, were you the one who reminded me that he was on staff there?
I think it was me.
Okay, so all right. So Connor really has nothing to do with this Johnny Mauerer story then. So it was the very reason Johnny was able to abuse so many young, underage female Scientology staff members is precisely because they were sending him around to every org in the West US to help with fundraising. And so he would arrive to these orgs And there's always like staff members at Scientology orgs seem to either skew really old or really young. I mean, I know it's not, there's some in the middle there, but so there would inevitably be these underage girls on staff in either the main registration office or the introductory registration office, or it would be someone who was on the post. Their job was to sign up new memberships for the International Association of Scientologists. And then he would get their phone numbers because he was going to help them with their sales. And then texting would lead to more than texting, would lead to in-person stuff. And so Scientology literally funded this guy's abuse of children. And then when they found out about it, those children and their parents were threatened with expulsion, declare an expulsion if they reported anything to the authorities. Now, you told, when I did a video about this, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, about Johnny Mauerer, and you contacted me and you said, I was there when Johnny got busted, but nobody knew what he was getting busted for. Yeah. What did you see happening?
So all of a sudden, Johnny wasn't on post anymore. And nobody would talk about it. Like it was just, Johnny's not there. I don't even know if anyone said like, don't ask. It was just it was so extremely clear that this was not something to like go prying into if I wanted to stay out of trouble. It was super hush hush, super secretive. Just all of a sudden, Johnny wasn't there. I think he got pulled to LA. The details are a little foggy because Division 5 does not really interact with the HES. So he wasn't like one of my people. So I didn't have like a whole lot to do with it. But like he got pulled to LA and like put on the meter and ethics interview and whatever. And then after that, he wasn't on staff anymore. And there may have been like a PTS type B, which is criminal declare, very quietly issued with like limited distribution. I could be wrong on that part. That's what I remember. But he was for sure just like not there. Don't ask any questions. Johnny's gone. Like we're taking the HAS. We're going to promote him to HES. We're going to take his little next level down junior and bump him up. And this guy's going to be the HES now. And Johnny's like not there anymore. And I'm nosy. I like knowing what's going on. So I very, very quietly did as much digging as I could. And like the only thing that was like, it was like a buzz, a kind of a rumor. There was nothing like confirmed, but it was like someone told someone that like he used to coach a softball team and the softball team was of young men, very young men. And he had some, Johnny had some gay stuff in his past and it came back with one of the young men. And it was like super clandestine, super like rumor. But it basically left the impression of like, well, he's not on staff anymore because he's gay. And also that he was gay with a minor, which is so like, I'm trying very hard not to cuss. I'm trying to keep it PG for your channel so that YouTube doesn't get mad at you. But I want to say a lot of cuss words right now. It's so bad on so many levels.
So I did a second video on Johnny Mauerer after you shared some of that information with me, pointing out sort of the hypocrisy might be the right word of them going, we're not going to tell anybody that Johnny abused Scientology girls because that would make us look really bad. We're going to tell people that he abused some non-Scientologist boys on a baseball team. And the video, I was like, isn't it insane that that's what they wanted people to think? That's what they thought was the good version of the story. And I found out since then, I might not have told you this, it's not just that they made that story up as a more palatable alternative. It turns out what came up in his sec checking is that he was also doing that.
Cool.
Yeah. And so now when you look at them not reporting any of this to the authorities, you can no longer only justify it by not reporting another Scientologist. I guess actually, now that I think about it, you can. I was conflating it with before it was only Scientologists who were his victims, and maybe they were going to handle that internally. But when you find out he's abusing non-Scientology kids as well, and you're still covering it up, and not only that, you send him to freaking Clearwater, where and so you said that he wasn't one of your guys because he wasn't in Division 5.
Right.
But do you even recall how you even became aware of it? Like, is it just, was there whispers about it?
Yeah. So when you're in management and you are somebody who runs one of the divisions, there's a couple of other like jobs that also go to these meetings, but there's meetings that you have to go to every week, once or twice a week. And in those meetings, it's like, I'm there, everybody in charge of every other division is there. The people who are directly in charge of the orgs are there. There's like a bunch of people who like all run orgs who all go to this meeting and like talk about, here's what's going on with the orgs this week. Here's the stuff with these. And so things would come up in these meetings and it wasn't like, okay, Johnny Mauerer is in trouble now and he's off staff. It was like find a replacement for Johnny. It wasn't like here's what happened with Johnny. It was just like we got to replace Johnny. And so you get kind of the outside edges of a picture without ever getting the details of the picture,
For the former SM members who watch, is this the Network Coordination Committee?
Yeah, Con MCC.
Okay, yes. So that's where basically all of the flaps and handlings and general business announcements would come up for all these things. And so that's where, for those watching, that's where you would be able to get this sense you already know not to ask, because if it was something that was going to be shared, it would actually have been shared right up front.
Yeah, it's
like these meetings don't shy away from discussing people's dirt.
No, not at all. It's like 25% planning, 25% gossip, 25%, 50% getting screamed at for not making the targets from last week. Like there were so many other like I just when I was in management, I knew so much about so many staff members, just like personal problems, personal dirt, because you tell one person one thing in that committee and they bring it to the meeting. Because if you can, anything that you can do to not be the one to blame for something going wrong, you're going to do it. Like any way that you can shift the anger to somebody else, you're going to do it. And that absolutely includes just like spilling people's secrets to an entire meeting full of executives.
Right. That's the other thing that's a little remarkable about even discussing such things at such meetings is it kind of implicates pretty much every senior executive at the Continental Management Office, because these things are they're not just brought up one-on-one in meetings. They're brought up in the meetings that are purely there so that everyone in the organization can coordinate and be on the same page.
Yeah. And it's like, it's to the point where like every so often there would be like, I would find something out and someone would come, like someone from OSA or someone from, senior INR would come and specifically like sit me down and be like, this is a thing you're not allowed to tell people about. Like, this is a thing you cannot talk about, because it was just anything else is gonna, like, everyone's gonna know it no matter what.
Right. Okay. So that's how you became aware of Johnny Mauerer. Someone mentions we need to find a replacement for Johnny. And essentially that's it. Yeah. Were issues okay? When I was in the Sea Org in LA, there's two instances I can think of where something came up involving abuse of underage children. In one case, it was the tech films I see. His name's Rowdy. I won't say his last name because it just seems inappropriate. He could be out of Scientology for all I know. And he was caught. It was divulged. I don't know how it came up that he was viewing inappropriate videos on his phone of the nature that we've sort of discussed in the film room.
Oh my
And
God.
as soon as this was discovered, he just disappeared. There was no route out process. There was no anything. There was pack his bags, get him off the base. Like, now in some respects, someone could go, wow, that's really great that they like have no tolerance for that. And you go, yeah, it's not like they reported him to anybody. They just don't want the legal liability of they already found out that something that was against the law was happening on their property. And their solution was get him off the property. So they never actually do anything intended to protect society from such a person or to involve the authorities, of course. So the other instance was some public Scientologist. It came up in his auditing that this is like a middle-aged man or something, had some relations with someone who was under the age of consent. And he was sort of on the runway to being declared, but they wanted to get as much auditing and money out of him as much money out of him as possible for all the sec checking. So they were sec checking him at his cost. And so they were just sec checking him to like get all the dirt. Now you have to wonder, like, it's kind of twisted, right? You're going to expel this guy, but before you do, you're going to expel this guy. You're not going to report him to the authorities, but before you expel him, you want to know every single disgusting, juicy detail of everything that he did. You have to ask yourselves, why? What's the purpose of that?
I mean, money and blackmail. Like, that's all I can think is money and blackmail. I will tell you. So when I was 15, I joined staff at Valley Org, and the first post that they put me on was COPE officer, which is essentially like somebody over Division I, kind of a general handling person. But I was the only person there during the day. So at 15 years old, I was doing all of the ethics cycles for all the day public, all 10 of them. But like 15 years old doing ethics cycles, and there was nobody there to like apprentice me or tell me what to do or anything. So instead what they did was they got like 5 or 6 different like set ethics programs from the ethics officer at ASHO that was like, if somebody is chronically late to course, here's the ethics program you give them. It's like, read this reference, do this clay demo, go pick up trash in the parking lot, whatever. If somebody is a chronic, I'm gonna try and censor myself for YouTube. If someone chronically pleasures themselves and watches adult films, which is a big no-no in Scientology, but if that comes up, then here's this program you give them, pain and sex and clay demo and the one thing from like APNA and like, here's your little like handy dandy ethics program. You just give them this program and you have them do this. They had one for CP. They had a CP handling program. This was common enough that it was one of the like, if this comes up, here's the program that you do. And it was like these references, and here's the like computer, like child lock computer program that you get them to download and like put on their computer and give you the password for it. And so that they can't.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. Scientology had a software that they would require.
Yeah, it wasn't like a Scientology software. It was just like a general, by the time I came around, it was 2007, late 2006, early 2007. So there were like, computer programs to like child-proof the internet or whatever. So if someone watches things they shouldn't be watching, you have them, here's a list of programs they can download and like give the password to the ethics officer at the org so they cannot unlock it themselves. So they don't know how to unlock it. They have to like go buy a new computer if they want to do this. And then like the CP handling program was like, get them to buy sec checking, get them to do an OW write-up, like get all of the details, give all the information to the DSA, let the DSA adjudicate like how serious is this, what do we need to do, and then go from there. And usually the action would be get them to buy a sec check, give them a bunch of sec checking, give them a type B declare, tell them, like find out when the statute of limitations is and tell them they're eligible for services again once that statute of limitations is up.
It's really interesting to consider that Scientology manages to profit off of the abuse its members commit against children. I mean, in the case you're talking about right now, it's not. No, I stand by what I said. I stand by what I said. Now, that doesn't even consider the fact of what you just described, that in many organizations, the adults who are Scientologists who are going to get their ethics handled are going to see a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Never mind that.
Yeah.
That's not that rare.
Oh no, it's very common because HCO has similar qualifications to the Sea Org, where if you've ever, lived a little bit in your life, you're not qualified. So pretty much almost anybody who is qualified to be an ethics officer is literally a child.
Yeah. Most Scientology ethics officers are underage girls.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you know what's crazy? Most Scientologists, they don't even think about this.
Nope.
Just like they don't think about how freaking weird it is that auditing sessions, and when you're dealing with kids, it gets more weird, are done in locked rooms. Like, I mean, you're so just conditioned to think, oh, it's just Scientology. That's just standard tech. What's the big deal? Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just literally just like you don't even give it a second thought. You don't give it a second thought. You're just like, okay, like, I guess I'm going to handle this. Like, I was at 15 years old administering OW write-ups to grown men who were writing things like very inappropriate things that a child should not have to read. But when you administer an OW write-up, which is basically like a written confession of all of your sins, essentially, part of administering
exact time, place, form, and event. Like, just for the watchers who may not know, an OW write-up is literally a written confessional where you're instructed to put in all the details, exact time, exact place, exact form, exact event. And the ethics officer, in this case, an underage girl, is supposed to sit there and read the whole thing in front of you.
Yep.
And then put you on the e-meter to make sure you feel good about what you wrote.
Yep. You got to go through, you got to read every single detail. You got to make sure that they did the format correct, that they included like number of times they did such and such a thing, like who it affected, the whole deal. So it's not just like, oh yeah, you write down all the things you feel bad about and you're good to go. No, like the person administering it has to read that and like comprehend it. And that's like definitely not stuff that a teenager should be having to read about adults.
Yeah. So the reason I mentioned that this had come up a couple times at ASHO when I was there is I was going to ask you, as a member of the Continental Network Coordination Committee, is this type of thing something that would come up at those meetings?
Kind of. Like if it was something like this where there was a legal liability involved, usually it would be very vague. Like it wouldn't exactly come up because OSA would be on top of it. Like they want to make sure that there is as little evidence as possible. They want to make sure that as few people know about it as possible. Prior to this happening, but also still like while I was at management level, there was a supervisor at San Francisco Org who was in his late 20s, who had started a physical relationship with a female staff member, I believe also at San Francisco Org, who was like 15. And like the reason I found out about it is because it came up and the auditor like wrote a knowledge report on it and the reports got sent up to us, and OSA was so angry, like really, really angry. And like the DSA at San Francisco Org got in trouble over this because the auditor was not supposed to have written these reports. Like the fact that the reports ever left the org at all and didn't just go straight to the DSA was like a huge flap, because it's like it's a paper trail, and they had to kick both him and the girl off of staff and like declare them type B and send them on their way until she was 18. And I believe they ended up getting married, which is horrifying.
So they kicked her off of staff, even though in the eyes of the law, she's the victim here.
Yep, but
Do
it's
they
a
kick her?
liability to keep her around.
So in your opinion, do they kick her off of staff because they think she's done something unethical, or is it a danger to have her around because she's a victim?
Both.
Wait.
I mean, like I'm sure what she was told is that she was kicked off because she did something unethical, but the real actual reason is that it's a liability to keep her around.
Right.
Because now that it's been written up and now that it's been sent out, like legally they would have, like, there is a requirement to report, and too many people know about it for them not to report it, and so they have to like do everything they can to show that they're doing something about the situation and not just letting it continue. So the best thing they could do is be like, you're ejected from Scientology, like peace out. I don't think they got SP declared. I think they got PTS type B declared again, so that like once she's 18 they can come back, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But I just, like, I remember that happening before the Johnny Mauerer thing happened, and then the Johnny Mauerer thing happened and it was super ultra secretive. I think probably because they had like screwed up on the last one.
Yeah. So I'm told there's 5 confirmed victims of Johnny Mauerer in the West US. Those are the only ones I know of for sure. And yet there are Scientologists who've watched these videos who are collectively gathering up intel and sharing information with me about, so far, no less than so far it's 25 people.
From Johnny?
Not victims, abusers.
Yeah. I know of at least 3 or 4, but I don't know if they're still alive. Just because I know, just because I have friends who, 2 who are out of Scientology, and I'm pretty sure their abusers are still alive, and that like they were victims and have since left Scientology partially because of how it was handled. And then another 2 who I think are still in Scientology, and their abusers were old enough that they are hopefully dead by now. But like the standard procedure is to blame the victim just as much, if not more so, than the abuser, especially if the abuser is the adult who has the money, who can then be regged. So it's in Scientology's best interest to keep them in Scientology and keep getting money from them if there's any way that they can do so. Yeah, when I first started dating my ex-husband, I was 16 and he was 21, and the senior CS at the org took me aside and took him aside separately and basically like threatened us and was like, I will kill you if you sleep together before B turns 18. Because there was another org where this happened, where, a couple got together and the girl was underage and the guy was not, and they both got kicked off staff, and like, we can't afford to lose you as staff members, basically. So like, I'll murder you if you do anything together. Which, like, the viewpoint and the priority is so weird, to take a 16-year-old aside and be like, don't seduce this adult man.
Right. But what did they think was going to happen? But you weren't told that you guys couldn't be in a relationship. But it's like he was how old? 20?
He was like 21. Yeah.
He's 21, you're 16, and all they say is, behave, you two.
Yeah. Don't play hide the salami.
Right. And they couldn't have thought that was actually not going to happen.
I mean, I don't know what they thought was going to happen. I don't know what they were going to do. We were 2 of the only full-time staff members. Like, who's going to enforce that? Who in the org that's not there is ever going to enforce that. Like, it's an empty threat. But it's just
Right.
like the viewpoint is so, it's so screwed up, and it's so fixated on how you're responsible. Like, you are responsible for everything that happens to you, and therefore it doesn't matter how old you are, you still seduced him.
Right. Well, you know, Scientology counts on the fact that people are reluctant to talk about these things. People don't want to be known as victims. People won't, take action against fellow Scientologists. There are some people who won't talk about allegations of crimes without the presence of a police report because they're afraid of getting sued or whatever. But that's one of the ways that I intend to use this YouTube channel, is to take all these Scientologists who have abused these children. And you and I know Scientology will never try to sue for discussing these things publicly, because once they do, everybody involved gets dragged into a deposition because they're the ones suing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is something that I consider to be a productive use of platforms such as this, is actually calling out these people who will probably never see a courtroom, probably never see jail or prison, but it doesn't mean that the information can't be put out there in the public. And I think the only reason people would be afraid of talking about it is, oh no, they could sue me. They can't sue. They can't sue me. They can't sue any of us former Scientologists, because this is the tip of the iceberg of the stuff they're hiding from the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are they going to do? They can't do a damn thing. They can't do a damn thing. And that's why I just want to reintroduce all of you once again to Johnny Mauerer. When he's not abusing underage girls, he's raising money for Scientology and working for his father's company here in Clearwater, Florida, called Teamwork Commerce or Teamwork Retail or whatever it is. So yeah. And maybe one of these days, the Clearwater police will realize that they should probably take Scientology off of its list of organizations here in Clearwater that are allowed to hire Clearwater police to do off-duty work. It really creates a chilling effect. Knowing that Scientology can hire the police creates a chilling effect in the Scientology community of even thinking a Scientologist, even if they wanted to go to the police, never would.
Mm-hmm.
Because they consider the police are in the pocket of Scientology, because they see the police doing security work at all of their events. Yeah. And, to Chief Dan Slaughter of the Clearwater PD, just think, this is what Scientology thinks of you and your officers in your city. When they have a serial abuser like Johnny Mauerer, they send him to Clearwater. They know you guys won't do anything about it. So, to be fair, what could the Clearwater police do about it if the crimes weren't committed here? I don't know. Maybe you guys figure out what you can do about it. You're the cops. So I want to ask whether other such things like this came up. I already asked you whether things like this sort of tended to come up at the network coordination committee, but aside from coming up at that committee, mm-hmm. Were there other kind of major flaps of this nature you'd heard about at any of the West US orgs?
Yeah, so not necessarily with underage people. I feel like there was maybe one or two other, such and such staff member got busted watching CP and they're not on staff anymore. They're kicked out or whatever, but it wasn't an executive, or it was somebody who was already in trouble for other things or whatever. There was definitely a lot of various soap opera type scandals that just happened. People would come for training and from different orgs, and then they would all be living in the same hotels together, and they would go sneak off to the roof and have sex on the roof, and then it was a whole flap, and they both got kicked off the program, and it was a whole thing. There was the senior CS Sacramento got caught pleasuring himself in the ivory tower constantly while reading PC folders.
Oh, is that John?
That was not John. That was a kid named Marshall Nesbitt. He was definitely after your time.
John had already set the bar pretty high for crazy stuff a senior CS does.
Yeah, no. This was somebody who he got kicked out of Flag. Like he went to Flag and then got kicked out of Flag, I think for watching adult films while he was in training. And then Asher tried to establish an outdoor trainee program like the one at Flag. And I was running that for a while, and it was hell. It was awful. But we pulled him to ASHO and we put him through all of his training at ASHO, and he got fully through senior CS training, even after I was off the senior qualsec post and I was off being a super and whatever. Like he got through his senior CS training. They sent him back to Flag. He got through some apprenticeship stuff. He went back to Sacramento, and then like a year later, he got busted because he was just whacking it full time in the ivory tower while reading PC folders and like watching adult films at the same time. And he was like maybe 19, 20. This kid. It was nuts. It was wild.
To have an 18 or 19-year-old senior CS is pretty crazy to begin with, but it seems like a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. I mean,
by the way, for the viewers, a senior CS is the senior case supervisor, is the senior most responsible person for overseeing the delivery of all professional auditing in the org. I mean, it's insane to think of a 19, 20-year-old on that post.
Yeah, it was there was a lot of yeah, there's so much gossip. There's so much soap opera stuff. Everyone went away for training like once every 2 years and would meet other people from other orgs and like fall in love. And then they'd go back to, I live in Rome and I live in Sacramento and we're in love. And so then it would be this whole like drama of transfers and like long distance romance. And like, oh my God, it was so much drama all the time.
That's what happened with Stephen Latch and Jennifer Latch. Yep. He was from San Francisco. She was from Chicago. She's like 40 years younger than him to boot. And
like 5 kids now.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, you have to understand, they were training when, I mean, Jen's like my age. I'm 42 now. We were like 15 years old back then. You understand? Like Jennifer Gendusa was like 15, 16 when she met Steve, who was like late 30s.
He was like in his 60s when I knew him, with like a midlife crisis motorcycle.
Yeah, no, and Steve himself was a trust fund baby who just did OT3 when he was like 16 or something.
Of course.
But anyway, so I'm going to be Johnny Mauerer is going to be a regular star on this channel, in addition to these other abusers, as I get information I can use. And it's just going to continue to beat Scientology over the head with this information about the crimes and the crimes that they cover up. And I mean, it'll be one of the things, hopefully, that contributes to their downfall.
Yeah, I wish. I hope. I so hope.
On another note, somewhat funny, somewhat crazy. We spoke earlier. You said you had this wild Tom Cruise story, and it is pretty wild. People talk about Tom Cruise getting special treatment and everything, and this to me was kind of like some next level stuff. What was the deal with first of all, and you found this out sort of when you were. Well, go ahead. Tell the story.
Okay. So when I was a teenager, a kid, before I joined staff, I went to a Scientology applied scholastic school called Renaissance Academy in La Cañada, California. Nancy Perotti. Hi, Nancy. I hope you're watching this. Nancy she was on OT7 at the time. That's Nancy. That's her husband, Pat. She was a teacher at the school. And very abruptly, like right before I went into high school, there was like a little assembly, and she announced like, I'm leaving. I'm not going to be working at the school anymore. I'm going to be full-time on staff over at Valley Org. I'm going to be an auditor there, and I'm just going to work there full-time and not do anything else. And everyone was like, yay, bye. We'll miss you, Nancy. Bye. Fast forward like 5 years, right? And I'm the Has at Valley Org, which is like HR director kind of, and Nancy's 5-year contract is up, and I am begging her to resign and stay on staff, because by that point it was like 30, 25 staff members left. Like, people were just jumping ship, and it was my job to keep them there. And so I'm like, with her, closed, locked door, locked office, like, what's the deal? Like, why won't you resign? Like, why won't you stay here? You've been full-time for like 5 years. You're one of the only people who is full-time. And she told me this story, like crying. Like, this was a very traumatic and upsetting story for her. But it is an absolutely insane story. Back when she was still working at the school, she was on OT7, she was at Flag, and she walked into an elevator. Hallway was empty, no one was standing there, no security guards or anything. She goes into the elevator. In the elevator is Tommy Davis and Tom Cruise. And like, surprise, absolutely wild that nobody was like guarding the elevator for that, but they're in the elevator. She's in the elevator alone with them. And I think she said, "Hello, sir," to Tom Cruise. She might have complimented his latest movie. It's, the conversation we had was back in 2011, 2012. So the details are a little foggy, but she said something like polite to him to, acknowledge that he existed and that she thought he was neat. I don't know that he ever even acknowledged her. She got to her floor. She walked out of the elevator. She is immediately grabbed by an ethics officer, brought into like a closed auditing room with the ethics officer and a bunch of executives, and Tommy Davis joined them, and like screamed at, like for an extended period of time, screamed at for her insubordination and how dare she, and like how awful she is for I don't know what the horrible thing she did there was. But she was evil and bad, and she had to pay for a bunch of sec checking confessionals. She had to like pay a bunch of money and do a whole huge ethics program and get interrogated and like stay at Flag and continue to pay for her hotel to stay at Flag for like an additional month or two. And then at the end of it, the way that they finally allowed her to go home is that she re-signed her staff contract at Valley for 5 years and agreed that she would leave her day job at the school and be full-time at the org and not be a dilettante anymore and like be gung-ho for Scientology. And so she spent 5 years hating every second of it, like wishing that she was not there, because they literally forced her to do this or else like be kicked off the level, not be allowed to go home, like question mark, what are like whatever. But it was like so traumatic for her that this is, 5 years later, she's like crying telling me this. And it was because she walked into an elevator that contained Tom Cruise.
Wow. I wonder, we've heard a story of Nazanin Boniadi is someone who's now a famous actress, but then was less well known, and she was the first one to win the competition. Well, she didn't know it was a competition to win the role of Tom Cruise's girlfriend. And one of the things that she did that was like an unforgivable sin to Tom Cruise is she was with him at the event where he won his big IAS Freedom Medal of Valor. And when he got back to his seat or whatever, or as he stood up, she said, "Very well done. Very well done." And that was viewed as condescending. Like, that's what you say. That's what a senior says to a junior. Very well done. Like, who are you to tell me very well done? And she was shipped off for sec checking and lower conditions and stuff like that. So it sort of makes me wonder whether Nancy accidentally said something that was perceived as condescending. Like if she complimented his latest movie, or she might have even said "very well done," because that's a very common thing to say.
That's what Scientologists say to each other. Like, that's the craziest part. That's like Scientology's for handshake, like, hey, bud.
Right. But could you ever imagine saying "very well done" to like a senior executive? When you think about it that way, would you? Sure. You'd never say it to your senior, right?
Right. But like,
you'd say it to peers. But that actually makes it even more sickening, is that what was insulting? You're not my peer. You don't tell me "very well done."
Yeah. It's nuts. It's nuts. And like she's someone like she's an old timer. She's been in Scientology at least since the 80s. I think since the 70s. And her husband has been just like a registrar, power FSM, like gets people into Scientology all the time for literally decades. Both of her kids are in CMO Clearwater. Like she's super gung-ho. And they were just like, oh, you insulted Tom Cruise by breathing his air.
Wow. Making her quit the job that she loves to go work full-time for Scientology for 5 years.
She was already staff at the org. She was part-time, but she was already on staff there. They made her re-sign and go full-time.
Wow. Incredible. All right, let's tackle some questions here and then we'll wrap it up. Michelle Grant, Google says Charles Manson was a Scientologist. Is that true? You know, what I've read is that while he was in prison, he might have read some Scientology books and he said, oh, that's too crazy for me. So ever since then, because someone quoted Charles Manson as saying that everyone until the end of time will think Charles Manson was a Scientologist, and it's really quite annoying. It's not your question that's annoying. It's that everyone thinks Charles Manson used to be a Scientologist. Okay, Taylor Lynn Hansen. Aaron, I made a photoshopped image of DM as a munchkin. Is that what you had wanted emailed to you? Yes, any good photoshops of Dave Miscavige living his best elf life are appreciated. Send them to me at growingupinScientology@gmail.com, and me and Mark Headley, either one of us or both, will have a lot of fun with it.
I can't wait to see when someone does an elf on the shelf Miscavige.
Yes.
I'm waiting for the day.
If you watch Mark's Top 10 Tuesdays, he shows all the shoops that people have sent him. And there was a hilarious one of 3 men and a baby. And it was me, Mike, and Mark holding a little baby David Miscavige. Oh my goodness. It was hilarious. Okay, this is one from Valerie Boljak. I'm sure there are a few good moments in life, but this must be a miserable existence in Scientology. The only hold Scientology has is family and saving the planet. What a con. So heartbreaking. It's true. I mean, that saving the planet thing, if you really believe it, it just puts you in a frame of mind where you can everything in life is subordinate to that. You'll put up with almost anything. That's how they get people to disconnect from their family, you know.
Especially if you grow up in it, and like from a very young age, you are told that you're being like raised to save the world. Like your brain is jello at that point. They're literally like molding kids' brains. Like you don't have the critical thinking skills when you're a kid to be like, that seems suspicious. It's like, no, I guess like I really am the last dying hope of the planet. So you just go until you can't anymore.
Exactly. All right, this will be the last one here from Ken W. Hey, I've just worked out why people send Mr. Mickiewicz so much money. It's Aaron's fault. He keeps telling people he's a little short. Yes, and guys, you know, as soon I need to get a little shelf up here so I can permanently display my life-size David Miscavige plush doll and vintage.
Oh my god,
so adorable, so adorable. The Keebler King.
Amazing that you got it to scale like that.
Oh Lord. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to hide this comment now. Oh, there it is. That's why it is. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching with us tonight. Thanks for sticking with us until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right